Last orders, please.
Shaun,
Yeah.
do you see what I'm saying?
Welcome to A Neat Retelling, the podcast where we explore all the ways old tales are made new. I'm your host, Jasmine Garcia, and joining me today are...
My name is Callie, and I am just your hapless hero enjoying a pint down at the Winchester.
My name is Connor, and I'm just going to wait for all this to blow over.
Hi, I'm Katie, and I agree. Always throw the Batman soundtrack.
And I'm Leaf Bradshaw, and according to my genetics and natural color, I've already got some red on me. It's in my hair.
There we go. And welcome back to Monster Month 2, The Dead Are Rising.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! Oh, in the name of God! I know what it feels like to be God!
Death is but the doorway to new life. We live today, we shall live again.
They're coming for you, Barbara.
In many forms will we return. And today we are doing something a little different because some people are still surprised that it's in the public domain. But Night of the Living Dead is indeed in the public domain due to an error when they were trying to submit it. So it has never been out of the public domain. And the way I see it, Night of the Living Dead was kind of the birth of a genre. So technically just about any zombie movie I think kind of owes a lot to it, or at least any modern zombie movie. We'll get into that someday. But the point is, not only is our selection obviously a classic in the zombie genre, it does directly take so many references from Night of the Living Dead that fuck it. For the sake of both myself and all of my friends, we are covering Shaun of the Dead, which just had its 20th anniversary. I did in fact see it in theaters for that, but we'll get more into that later.
Greetings, I am IER-16, Star Wars Retelling Connections. Point of intersection found. This is a degree 3. Simon Pegg voiced Dengar in the 2008 Clone Wars series and played Unkar Plutt in The Force Awakens. Additional degrees include Nick Frost, who voiced SM-33 in Skeleton Crew, and Peter Serafinowicz, who played Darth Maul / Battle Droid Commander / Gungan Scout in The Phantom Menace. Uncredited amendment found. For a full list, check out the episode entry at ineachretelling.tumblr.com/sibling blogs.
So, with that all in mind, what is everyone's connection to Night of the Living Dead or just the zombie genre in general?
My connection to Night of the Living Dead is that I have never seen it, but there will be an adaptation on the podcast, Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe, of Night of the Living Dead. And that's the extent. At zombies, I mean, Zombieland, I think, was the first zombie movie I ever saw, actually. Always obey your zombie rules, kids.
The thought occurs that might be true for me too as far as cinematic features go, though of course Night of the Living Dead I am well aware of for its historical significance, both for being an impressive example of how you can somehow make an iconic movie with basically no budget, and also how it's one of the first horror movies that I'm aware of where a black man was the protagonist, so that was very significant at the time, I would imagine, especially for the late 60s. So, my connection to the zombie apocalypse subgenre of horror in general is kind of odd because I've always been familiar with the concept of zombies for as long as I can recall. Because, I would see the odd thing from like Scooby-Doo or something like that that made references to zombies.
Including
Uh,
Zombie Island, of course, the best Scooby-Doo
oh,
movie.
oh yeah, it's terror time again, people. But it took a while for me to get around to watching a lot of zombie movies, and a lot of it was because, not necessarily because I was squeamish about gore, but because I found it a very difficult premise to suspend my disbelief over. But that being said, when it's executed well, it's executed incredibly well. Like, I've seen the odd bit of media since then, and it feels odd to say that even despite the fact that I've become more well-versed in zombie media lately, this film, Shaun of the Dead, I think is up there as quite possibly the best zombie apocalypse movie I've ever seen. It's weird how it's technically a parody and yet such an excellent example of that subgenre of horror at the exact same time.
I put it up there with Scream in terms of, yes, it's technically deconstructing the genre, but it's also just a really good example of the genre.
Oh yeah, Scream's a great deconstruction / loving homage to the slasher film.
I've never really been much of a zombie fan, I must admit. When it comes to horror movie monsters, I'm more of a vampire person. And zombies, frankly, scare the crap out of me. But I saw this movie originally because I've always been a bit of an Anglophile, and I read an interesting review about the film, enjoyed that, there's a good hefty dose of understated British humor. And I believe I went to see it with friends. I don't think that I initially saw it on DVD or anything like that. But I fell in love with the film, partially because it does have that a very British sensibility about it. Also, the soundtrack is great. If it came out in, 2004,
Yeah.
then 2 years later, the very first time that you and I ever had a conversation ever, and this would have been over AOL Instant Messenger because we are ancient creaking shambolic horrors ourselves. That I think that was the first movie that I made some sort of reference, some sort of joke. I can't remember what it was, but it was a Shaun of the Dead reference. And you immediately replied back with the concluding, the second part of that. And I was just like, oh, okay, this guy's cool.
Aww.
That's all you need if you want to. If you're trying to get a significant utter, you just need to be very familiar with early 2000s British horror comedies and or British rock bands.
And then later I found out that you were a horror fan.
Yeah.
And you're like, what horror movies do you like? And I'm like, yeah. And that's how you found out that my idea of quote unquote horror is stuff like Shaun of the Dead, Interview with a Vampire, Only Lovers Left Alive. I prefer either comedies or kind of the more, sweep me away gothic horror kind of thing.
I would still very much count those, though. The cool thing about the horror genre is that it's so malleable. There's so many different subgenres that there really is something for everybody.
There really is. Zombie, creature feature, slasher, supernatural, so many different subgenres.
My own introduction to zombie media and Night of the Living Dead happened when I was kind of in my early teens. I've seen both versions of Night of the Living Dead, the original version, which is in the public domain, and a remake that Romero did in, I want to say, in 1991, which plays along much of the same story beats. There are a few kind of plot changes in the sort of final act, and it's not as good overall, which is fair to say, I think. I have always been a big fan of zombies and zombie media. I have watched pretty much all of Romero's Dead movies, including the later ones that were really, really bad. Big fan of Max Brooks's zombie books. I'm hopeful one day that we'll get a HBO prestige TV adaptation of World War Z. Read the entirety of The Walking Dead and tried to watch the TV show, but that's a rant for a different podcast and another day. But overall, for me, zombies are my favorite monster. I think that they are the perfect representation for whatever social ill you want to discuss. I just think at their base level, they're just absolutely terrifying. It's a thing that looks like a human being, but unlike say a vampire, it can't be spoken to, it can't be reasoned with, never sleeps. It has only one goal, and it will just continually approach that goal for as long as possible. And I think the most terrifying thing about zombies, and you see this in every zombie film or TV show or book you read, including Shaun of the Dead. When zombies show up, society just immediately falls apart because we as a collective species just cannot handle what we're seeing. And so we just immediately turn on each other and fall apart. That's what makes zombies terrifying. The fact that, you know, unlike a werewolf or a vampire or the creature from the Black Lagoon, zombies hit that nerve in us, that lizard brain nerve, that uncanny valley fear that we have of seeing something that looks like a person but absolutely has zero humanity left in it. It just exists on pure instinct. And it's terrifying.
That was fantastic, for the record. That was beautifully put.
Hard to have put it any better, honestly.
No notes. Go be a film critic.
But anyway, as for me, much like Leaf, I was just aware of it by reputation, but as I've said in other podcasts, I was a bit of a fraidy cat as a child. Scooby-Doo was about all I could handle, and I could barely handle Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, even though I just said that it is my favorite Scooby-Doo movie of all time. But yeah, I could barely handle that, to give you an idea of what my barometric was when I was about 8.
If you want haunted, you came to the right place.
Yep. But as I got older, I got more into the horror genre, especially through Carrie, and the less we go into that tangent, the better right now. And Scream, as I had mentioned earlier. And that was kind of what launched me into getting more into horror in general. And I did definitely see Shaun of the Dead first. I don't know when I saw it. There are just certain movies where, like, once I see them, they're so embedded in me, I don't even remember when exactly they became a part of my life. Then, soon after, I did see Night of the Living Dead with my family, actually, and I really was struck by how masterfully made it is. But yeah, Connor, you're definitely the who's engaged with the most Romero media, because I haven't yet to watch any of the other of his zombie movies. But honestly, if any of them are even half as good as Night of the Living Dead was, that's fantastic. And not only is it really cool how our lead is a black man, and Romero constantly claimed that this was just a case of colorblind casting. I don't know how true it is, who knows. But considering how he meets his end and the fucking gut punch it is, one has to wonder, at the very least, if perhaps that was added on later on. But considering how troubled the production was there, who the hell knows?
Yeah, whether that was intentional commentary or not, it's nonetheless powerfully haunting, especially given the context of when the film was released, considering another actual example of someone who met their end in the same way that exact same year.
Ooh. Yeah. Also, I would like to point out there's actually a kind of a cool family tree thing going on here. Because, of course, you got Night of the Living Dead. Then you kind of go to Shaun of the Dead. And then you go to my favorite piece of zombie media ever. Like, Shaun of the Dead objectively is the better movie. But Anna and the Apocalypse has my heart.
'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. Young Anna was nestled, all snug in her bed, not knowing tomorrow she'd meet the undead. How would she survive? What this season would bring? Well, that's simple. She'd stab, she'd slash, and she'd sing.
Have any of you seen that? Callie, I know you haven't, but anyone else?
It's on my list.
Yes.
Still have to get around to that one.
I've not seen that one yet.
You can see the Shaun of the Dead DNA in that movie, and it's on my Christmas time rotation pretty much all the time, even though it always makes me cry. The soundtrack's incredible, the characters are lovable, the kills are gruesome, very good time. And much like what we are going to be talking about today, boy does it hit different post-2020.
Oh boy, does it ever. Right down to the disagreements over what could have caused it, and people feeling defiant and letting their worst sides come out because of the tension and all that. Oh yeah, it was strong stuff, man. Hell, even the sense of directionlessness in life that we get commentary-wise on our main character of Shaun, played by Simon Pegg, that also kind of hit a bit hard because unfortunately I do completely understand what it's like to be that kind of person. To a degree, I'm still trying to figure out if I'm not still that person to a degree. Someone who hasn't sorted his life out yet, you know? Because, oh my god, he's a whole generation older than millennials, and yet he seems to embody that similar millennial ennui of just not really knowing what to even do with his life except just exist. And then a zombie movie happens.
Katie, you had mentioned that it especially hit you hard with this viewing, right?
I think it did for several different reasons. When COVID initially arrived in the US, you could kind of slowly see this kind of like this strange rolling effect where as time went on and news of the disease basically got closer and closer, as news of this new disease, started rolling through, you started to look at people differently. And I have seasonal allergies. Sometimes it's like dry air, I'll cough or I'll sneeze, kind of clear my throat or whatever. And you'd go into the grocery store and like you would cough or you'd hear somebody cough and immediately all eyes are on you and you have to kind of give the like I'm fine, this is allergies, trust me, I'm fine. But then you start to hear people with like that like gurgling cough that you get with COVID, and it became, to Connor's point, it became this situation where people started to become really suspicious of others. For me, as somebody who is interested in medieval history, I started to get those weird little questions about like, what is this going to be like? Are we talking like, worse than average flu season? Are we talking 1918 style flu pandemic where people's lungs just kind of fill with blood and they choke to death on their own fluids? Are we talking about like a Black Death situation where anywhere between 1/3 to 1/2 of the world population dies? What are we dealing with here? I was shocked by how my attitude changed about the movie, and I still like it. It's still a fun movie, but I found it much harder to laugh at, even though there's some great jokes and some really funny moments. And I think it was because like you notice little things throughout the film, like very early on in the film, when Shaun's stepfather stops by his workplace to remind him that he has to visit his mom, and he walks out and you see like 4 or 5 army trucks drive by. When you initially see the movie, you're like, oh, here it comes. But having fortunately not directly been affected, I was extremely fortunate that nobody in my family passed away from COVID. I do know people, like close family members, who did get sick with it, but fortunately, they are, fingers crossed, none the worse for wear. But all the little hints, I think, triggered something in me, reminding me of all the little things that started to show up that told you that this was not a normal situation. The benefit of the film is like knowing how it ends, but being put into that mindset reminded me personally of a time when there were so many unknowns and there was no way, there were no good decisions to make anymore. Do I go out? Do I stay home? Do I have somebody deliver my groceries so that there's fewer people in the store? Or am I a bad person for putting that person at risk? Should I go? Should I go visit my grandmother in an assisted care facility? Because at the time, we don't know how this is carried. What if I touch her and I happen to have it and that ends up killing her? But at the same time, she's in assisted care. She's isolated. She's lonely. What do I do? And I think for me, in hindsight, that was why I had a very rough watch. I was surprised. I had to kind of take it in stages because the film reminded me of those times and reminded me of a time when I was thinking, we could all just, sit back and wait for this to blow over, or we could be, back in like the 1300s in England, watching as half of our town just dies overnight. And all you can do is dig a hole as fast as you can or light a fire and torch their house because there are not enough people around to help you do last rites. There are not enough people around to help you carve headstones. You just kind of have to keep going and hope to God that you aren't the next one.
There was that aspect of like, well, no one knows anything about anything. And as more information came out, it was just replaced with more questions. And I think that's probably a good reason why, now watching a movie like Shaun of the Dead, or even an older zombie movie that kind of has a more serious bent to it, which is not to say Shaun of the Dead doesn't have some, even then, like some great dramatic beats to it. Watching Shaun of the Dead now and seeing the fantastic way that Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg, who wrote the script together, watching all the ways that they planted those seeds and generated that, you know, creeping doubt of what was happening, and the creeping fear of something terrible encroaching upon you. It does feel differently now. Yeah, everything seemed normal, and there were jokes and there was confusion about why people were, you know, at the time we felt overreacting. And then suddenly, much like in Shaun of the Dead, one day it just felt like everything changed. One day I was going into the office every day, and then half the people were going into the office because they were offering people to work from home. And then one day my supervisor comes over to me, my department head, she comes over to me and she goes, "Connor, can you work from home?" And I said, "Yeah, I could do it if I needed to." And she just said, "Okay, good. We'd like you to start working from home." And I didn't go back into the office for 3 years.
Yeah, and just thinking about that time and thinking about the correlation with this earlier movie made to all of this happening. At the time, I think I made an allusion to this in our chat where I said, you know, this is, you know, a movie that I watched back when I was young, when, you know, when you and I were both younger and kind of stupid, and thought, you know, nothing bad is ever going to happen to us. We are rocking and rolling. We just got out of the 90s, and like, yeah, you know, 9/11 happened, but like, you know, the war on terror is winding down, and now it's a, you know, bright, bold new future in which we stride hand in hand with our fellow man. And then a whole lot of things happened, culminating with a global pandemic. I had to be the reasonable one in my family because my mom was very concerned that this was the harbinger of the end times. And while I'm telling her, like, "Mom, it's fine, it's fine, don't worry about it, it's fine," I'm studiously remembering to keep your mouth shut about 1918. Keep your mouth shut about the Spanish flu. Keep your mouth shut about it. Because if she hears about it, she'll freak out. And don't mention the Black Death. Like, just don't. No historical antecedents. No historical examples. Because every historical example that you have involves calamity and societal upheaval, and that is not what your mom needs right now. Just thinking about, we were not aware of how far this would go. The scene in Shaun of the Dead where they are holed up in the Winchester, they're holed up in this place that they are hoping is more secure than their own homes. And, you know, they're flicking through the television, and every single channel from the BBC to MTV just says stand by for further information. And I mentioned to Connor when we were watching that scene that during COVID, when they were talking about things like, you know, if enough people get sick, water treatment plants might not be in service, so you might want to have extra water on hand. There might be food shortages, so have some pantry staples. You know, in my mind, I'm like, what happens if I turn on the radio tomorrow? And it suddenly dawns on me, they're just playing classical music and nobody's talked for like 3 hours. Fortunately, that did not happen. But in that moment in the film, I was once again kind of taken back to that moment, you know, several years ago, where I'm thinking, how exactly what's going to happen here?
Okay, Editor Jasmine here. I need to get us out of this here tonal crater. So, while I was editing this, I did find out that it turns out that we were not the only ones who made connections between Shaun of the Dead and COVID-19, because it turns out Nick Frost and Simon Pegg did a parody of the Winchester Plan. I will be throwing in a link in the show notes, but here's a nice little clip to bring us back to happier places.
Do not go to the Winchester. The pub is out.
Even if it's shut?
Especially if it's closed. Remember what happened the last time?
Yeah.
The foreshadowing and callbacks that this film is jam-packed with, it's so clever. Honestly, Edgar Wright is such an entertaining writer and director, in my opinion, and because there's just so much attention to detail that I have such respect for, because you don't see it so often in other filmmakers.
So much setup and payoff just branches. Like, in order to write this with so much setup and payoff, you needed a goddamn diagram, I'm sure.
I think it's a testament to how much of like a cinephile Edgar Wright is, fan of like a very specific genres of film. I'm sure he could sit down and talk with you about, like, you know, the French New Wave or Italian neo-realism, but you can tell by the body of his work that he has a real love for genre, and he has a real understanding of what makes a specific genre work. I've been a huge fan of Edgar Wright since watching the TV show that he did, Simon Pegg and Jessica
Yeah,
Lange.
Spaced.
Yeah, Spaced is an amazing show. When it came out, it was the way it was shot and presented, it looked like nothing else. And you can see that same visual flair in Shaun of the Dead. So yeah, I agree with you there in terms of like all of the little references and the way he ties it all into like a coherent and really strong narrative. So it doesn't feel like it's just an homage to the movies he likes. It really feels like it is a continuation of that style of film that he really enjoys and a worthy addition to that canon.
Absolutely. Like this and the other two films that make part of what's known as the Cornetto trilogy, they're both loving homages to and parodies of these very specific types of genre films while still functioning as great incarnations of those same genres. And that's to say nothing of, again, Edgar Wright's real knack for taking what seemed like the most innocuous of dialogue exchanges and then calling back to them towards the end in a remarkably powerful recontextualization, whether it's funny or dramatic. There's just so many of them, it's hard to list them all.
There are whole compilations on YouTube just doing side-by-side comparisons of different scenes, like comparing, say, Shaun's walk to the corner store, both before and after the zombie apocalypse starts, or hell, even just glad somebody made it. Just all these little threads that keep on coming back. It's brilliant.
And also another thing that I love about Edgar Wright, maybe I'm armchair diagnosing here, but something about the way Edgar Wright loves to time action to needle drops in the soundtrack, I find that as an autistic person extremely relatable. When I'm listening to stuff through my headphones, I often will deliberately time my movements to whatever song is playing. And this is before I even saw Baby Driver or anything like that. I just noticed, man, Edgar Wright has a similar fondness for timing the movement, not necessarily to the score, like hiring the composer to write a score that, you know, matches the music like a cartoon, but no, specifically choreographing the editing and movements to his needle drops in the soundtrack. Like, that is insanely fun, in my opinion. I mean,
thing? Oh, God.
It seems like it to me. I find it incredibly relatable, and I don't know a lot of other people who are more holistic who have a similar habit that they shamelessly just flaunt when they're out in public. You know what I mean?
Damn it. My neurodivergent friends need to stop being relatable, or I need to get evaluated already.
Hey, if I had to beat up a zombie and Don't Stop Me Now by Queen started playing, yes, I would absolutely be beating that zombie in time to the rhythm of Don't Stop Me Now by Queen. Are you kidding me?
I mean, obviously, that's the best needle drop in cinematic history, possibly.
It's certainly up there as in one of the most entertaining ones, that's for sure.
But yeah, that opening scene in the pub, Callie and I were singing You, Me, You, and Steve by Garfunkel and Oates to ourselves.
It's not that I don't like your friend, but how many hours with him can you spend?
I know he's your best friend, but you do live with him.
I know.
It's not that I don't like Ed. Ed, it's not that I don't like you.
Sorry?
It'd just be nice if we could
Fuck.
spend a bit more time together.
Bollocks.
Just the two of us.
Cock it.
Because fucking Ed.
Fucking Ed. Just like, we've all felt like the Ed in the relationship at some point, though. Let's all just be honest with ourselves.
Every once in a while, sometimes. But honestly, more often than not, I felt like the Shaun.
I hate to admit it, but a little bit, yeah.
Like, more often than not, I felt like the kind of person who is aware of but doesn't know how to get over the fact that I just didn't know how to stand up for myself and sort things out and stay organized and, you know, actually try to consider other people's emotions before mine. Like, I've been in that situation before, and I hate how relatable I have found some of Shaun's blunders, because, oh my god, I have had similar moments where I've made mistakes like that, and I desperately hope that I've at least improved from that in recent years.
Or like you feel like you need to make excuses for somebody, and it's just like, it's just like, no, I want this person in my life. Please stop giving them a hard time. But on the other hand, oh my god, can you please stop making me have to make excuses for you?
Stop being such a liability, man. I'm trying to stick up for you.
It's like, I'm just laughing because it's like, I'm the liability. Hi, I'm the liability bestie. I know. It's okay.
I'm sorry. I feel awful for thinking it. Let me be clear.
I am both. It's okay.
I think we're all a little bit of both. Yeah, but
I got medicine and I got therapy. Kids, go to therapy. Get help.
Ed, get therapy. Oh wait, he can't now.
Oh my goodness. But yeah, but also,
There's
the
a-
whole difficulty about relationships. It's just like, again, it's just like, oh man, I forgot to reserve on time and now I can't. Hey, this place that you don't really like going to, can we go there again? Yeah, of course he got dumped for that. It was clear that this was a pattern that he kept saying he was gonna break away from, but when a chance came to prove that he was breaking away from that, he blew it.
Yeah, no, Liz is 100% right to dump him at that point. Liz is actually a super underrated aspect of this movie.
She really is.
As mean as it feels in the moment when Peter Seraphin Oates literally says to him, "Sort your fucking life out, mate." You know, he's not wrong. It's just, damn. I know if I were in that moment, I would get defensive right away, all the same.
Yeah, it's like Pete is not wrong. He's just kind of an asshole about it.
Honestly, likewise, even for basically every character who at first you think is going to be some sort of antagonist in the story beyond just the whole zombie threat, there's never a character who doesn't have a good point that we follow along in this narrative, and it's kind of admirable in a way. Even the characters you're supposed to hate, there are moments where it's just like, damn it, you're not wrong.
There is a shocking amount of empathy in this silly little rom-com.
He's out of line, but he's right is a continual theme throughout this movie.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Really, the one thing I think about Liz is that I'm almost bummed out that, you know, her starting point about is how it's like, it's not that I don't like what we're doing now, but I would like to do a little bit more. I'd rather not end up being one of these people who just go to the Winchester all the time wondering what the fuck happened to their lives, to being a lot more content with things. But with that said, I can understand why she would want to slow down after going through the amount of trauma that everyone goes through in this movie. But I guess
Right?
part of me is a little bummed about that. It's just like, it does almost feel like settling to a degree.
It really does. Like, post-pandemic, I still got the travel itch. It didn't go away just because a pandemic got in the way.
Like, as much as I love this movie, almost a better ending might have been that Shaun is more open to doing a bit more, because now it's just like, holy shit, we almost died. What have I done with my life? Let's do more.
Because, I've talked about this before with you, Jazz. Before I was scheduled for liver surgery that week of February, I was supposed to go to London and Paris and Disneyland Paris on my American Airlines benefits. And then I didn't.
Because of the pandemic, yeah.
And now I probably never will, because flights are expensive to Europe.
Oof.
And I will never mark off my bucket list of getting to go to every single Disney park in the world.
I was going to Michael Tilson Thomas's retirement concert as music director for the San Francisco Symphony. Yeah. I booked the flight tickets and everything.
Like, yeah, there's a lot about, just missed opportunities and feeling like you've wasted something of your life.
The Hadestown tour was going to come to Dallas on my birthday, and then it didn't.
Connor, Katie, do you have any thoughts on the opening? Like in the pub?
Yeah.
And honestly, even just the opening credits where it's like, oh, are we already zombies, basically?
Yeah, I always find that kind of interesting. I know at the time that I saw this movie, I was in my 20s. I was in my early 20s. I was dealing with the fact that I knew a lot of people who, graduated from the same school I did and already had jobs lined up. Like, oh yeah, so-and-so already found a job in like Los Angeles and New York and, this, that, and the other. And I was still in Ohio. I was working for a B2B, business-to-business magazine publishing company. And it was steady work. It was fine. But at the time, I definitely wanted something more. It did not help matters that just down the street from the little tiny office in the little tiny town that I was working, there was it's still there. It's a great little restaurant called the Winking Lizard. The restaurant, it was in I think it was called like the Peninsula Dance Hall or something like that. People who are listening, if you know Northeast Ohio, you probably know what I'm talking about. But it had a look and feel not dissimilar to the interior of the Winchester. And my editor, God love him, on some random Fridays, he'd just say, come with me, we're going to go have an editorial meeting. And he'd take me and a couple other people to the restaurant. And he's like, okay, cool. Now that our boss isn't here, have some beers. It's Friday. um, but yeah, at the time, you see that movie, and that's, for me anyway, that was always like the big fear. It's like, am I going to end up working in this job for the rest of my life? Am I going to end up like, hanging out with friends? But and nothing wrong with friends. I love them all dearly. But it's like, is this going to be, when my life is flashing before my eyes, when I hopefully reach a ripe old age, is it just going to be an endless montage of various beverages and various entrees that I've had at various restaurants that on a never ending loop? And so there was kind of that feeling of stagnation, of that feeling of fear of like, oh God, like, don't let me get to almost 30 and have all of this happen. I don't want to say that the movie kind of indirectly made me want more, but it was a factor, that and getting into music stuff. There's this great song on The Darkness's first album, which came out around this time, called Stuck in a Rut. And so I would think about that movie and I'd think about Stuck in a Rut, and I'd drive around my little suburban town and hope for something better. And fortunately, I found it. He's sitting across the table from me.
Yay. Aww.
That's adorable.
I love you two are adorable. We love you so much.
You're a much better couple than the main couple in this movie, even though I have a fondness for him. Now the question is, do I mean Shaun and Liz or Shaun and Ed?
Either couple is kind of dysfunctional. I think Shaun and Liz has already been stated like 100% right, that she needed more from Shaun, and if he wasn't going to show that he could like grow and kind of do something with himself, then she was right to dump him. And I think that, when we see them at the end of the movie and they're back in the house and they're talking about like basically having a pretty normal Sunday afternoon, it's a sign that he's gotten more comfortable with the idea of like being with her in that way. Like, I mean, when we meet them, they've been dating for 3 years. You would think after 3 years they would have moved in together, but they haven't. So at the end of the movie, the fact that they are actually living together, and that Shaun is actually interested in keeping the house neat and tidy, which is not something that he ever had to worry about before, because even if Pete would constantly shout at him to clean things up, he never really had to. We never really felt that he had to like do anything, because he had Ed there to kind of act as a sort of like, Ed was kind of like an excuse for Shaun to not do anything. And when we talk about like the opening scene, and we talk about like the first act of the movie where we meet Shaun and we see where he is in his life prior to the zombies appearing, it's interesting to watch the movie now at 40 compared to when I watched the movie for the first time when I would have been like 20, and recognizing a bit more of the ways in which Ed is holding Shaun back, and at the same time the way is that Shaun kind of relies on Ed to justify his own fear of growing up and growing older. Like, he can always rely on Ed to basically help him make the worst decisions, because Ed will make them, and then Shaun can kind of justify going along with them, even though right up until they get to the Winchester, I think Shaun's resentful of Ed throughout the entire movie, but he's also grateful for Ed's presence in his life, because it makes him feel like he's not 29 years old and facing his 30s and still working like as a shop assistant in an electronics store.
Yeah, like Shaun is given a leadership role at his job, which he's not comfortable with because he doesn't like being a leader, but he's the oldest on the staff who's still showing up because everyone else is sick except for a few teens,
With no real ambition to actually do better than that. And then, the movie happens, and by the end of it, Shaun has kind of come to a place in his life where he can feel comfortable growing up and becoming more mature, giving more of himself over to his relationship with Liz, while at the same time finding a healthy way to maintain his friendships and that youthfulness that Ed gave him. Although, probably not in the way that any of them expected him to.
And I want to say here, if you don't mind, that what's interesting about watching this movie when you're in your 20s and you're seeing this, is like, because the message of the film, one of the messages of the film, because there are several, but one of the messages is, life is short, so, take charge of your life, do whatever you need to do to live the life that you want to live, etc., etc. And when you're in your 20s, you're like, yeah, man, if there was a zombie apocalypse, like, I would take charge. I'd know what to do. This would help me grow up and like really take charge of my life. I'd be able to go out there and, just take on the world because I've lived through the worst of it. And I saw at the time I saw that movie, I'm like, yeah, that's a great message to take from it. However, when you see that movie again, like we are both in our 40s. And so when you see that movie now, especially in light of things that we have gone through. And again, acknowledging that we are very fortunate. There have been people who have suffered very terrible things, and we've been pretty lucky, all things concerned. But you watch that movie now, and you're like, for some people that really works. Sometimes there's a galvanizing event that really, makes somebody take their life in their own hands and live the life they want to live, but not always. Because right now I'm still kind of getting used to being like, cool, we're going to go out in public and I get to interact with people. My new job, I have to go to conventions, and there's definitely an on-off switch where I am quote unquote social and quote unquote perky, and then I go back to my hotel room and I'm like, oh thank God, oh my God, that's over.
Yeah, it's called being an introvert who went through collective trauma. Oh God.
Yeah, if anything, the film emphasizes how a galvanizing event doesn't inherently mean galvanizing someone to become a better person. It just means galvanizing someone to just sort of fall back on whatever they're certain is most likely to get them out of trouble, or how to escape from whatever's frightening. Because, yeah, at first it seems to be an alright plan, and then when it actually plays out, oops, it turns out this plan actually kind of sucked. So...
Yeah, because that's the thing. Like, yeah, obviously Shaun does kind of learn how to step up, but, the fact is, the whole...
Take car, go to Mum's, kill Phil, sorry, grab Liz, go to the Winchester, have a nice cold pint, and wait for all this to blow over. How's that for a slice of fried gold?
He played it off as trying to make sure that they were okay, but there was some inherent selfishness there. Like, I think deep down he was trying to use this as a way to win her back at first. Obviously, as time went on, he actually did start stepping up, and again, giving that...
As Bertrand Russell once said, the only thing that will redeem mankind is cooperation. I think we can all appreciate the relevance of that now.
And really being a leader. It is a wonderful character arc to watch. It's stuff like that makes you recognize, okay, I could see why Liz does end up taking him back. It's not just the trauma, it's not just settling. She saw a new side of him that she could see herself being happy with again.
Yeah. Even though Shaun fundamentally didn't actually change that much when you really think about it, he learned how to be a bit more confident and a bit more assertive and how to stand up for himself. But at the end of the day, he is still a guy who's really not all that motivated to accomplish anything great with his life. He just wants to hang out with his buddy and play video games and not have to think about things and have a good time with Liz. He wants to have a boring life, almost, is what it feels like, or at the very least he's content with living one. And because it seems like Liz feels like, well, that whole zombie apocalypse thing was enough adventure for a lifetime, so you know what? Yeah, I think it's fine if I have someone like that as a partner. So I get the point earlier of you thinking it feeling like settling by the end for sure.
It's difficult whether or not Liz is sort of like settling, or if it's a case of the two of them becoming a bit more comfortable with what they want out of a relationship and what they can kind of give each other. Like, I think by the end, Shaun asks her, what do you want to do? For me is the sign that, like, he's happy to let her take the
He's
lead.
starting to think about her wants and not just his.
Yeah. And then when she tells him, like, what they want, what she wants to do, that's her kind of like giving him kind of what he wants as well, which I think is a sense of like comfort. Like, you get the sense that like Shaun is the homebody of the pair, and Liz is the one who's like, I'm gonna sign us up for tango lessons, and Shaun is gonna be like, you know what? Why not? And that's the sort of adventure that he feels comfortable with, knowing that at the end of the day, they're gonna grab a quick pint at the Winchester afterwards, and then go home and make sure Ed's chains are still solid, and then get some sleep.
Yeah, watching this, and I keep alluding back to watching this when I was in my 20s, but and the very first time I ever saw the movie, that ending did feel not really like a bummer ending, but it's like, oh no, oh man, they turned into adults. Oh my God, they became like every suburban couple I know. They decorated the house, and they're like, their big event for the day is having a cup of tea. again, this is back when I lived in a time where nothing bad had ever really happened to me. And then I applied for a fiancé visa for my husband during an administration that was pretty openly hostile to immigration. I got him moved down here. We got married. There was a pandemic that happened. There was an insurrection that happened. There was an immigration meeting that happened 4 days after said insurrection with warnings saying that federal offices might be targeted by outside groups. So we were sitting in an immigration office with a woman who was looking at us stone-faced and asking questions to confirm whether or not we were an actual couple, while a truck drove by outside and made a big booming noise. And we had to just sit there with our masks on because it was the pandemic, and no facial expressions, because my immigration lawyer said don't try to be cute with them, don't try to be funny. They will take that as you trying to bluff. So just answer their questions, as little emotion as possible. You just got to get through it. And so now all of that has happened, and I gained a new appreciation for what do you want to do tonight, sweetheart? And the answer being nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Do you ever ask an adult what they did over the weekend and they say they didn't do anything? Their faces light up.
I think it's also just Liz being realizing that there is more to Shaun, and that he stepped up when no one else expected him to. Guy in glasses whose name escapes me because he was such a dick I didn't bother to learn his name.
I just know him as the guy from Black Books.
Derek, was it Derek?
I just know him as the guy from Black Books.
Yeah. Hold on a second. Whenever I do a podcast like this, I always open up the IMDb page.
I have the Wikipedia page up, but I'm just petty and I don't like him.
David.
His character's name is Dave.
Played by the brilliant Dylan Moran.
Dylan Moran is an
he's
amazing
great.
actor.
Yeah, he was also in Notting Hill, which I discussed on River's podcast, which, by the way, as of this recording, just dropped today. And he was also a prick in that. And another interesting Notting Hill connection is the whole taking down the messages bit in the beginning. It's just man.
Point being, I think the reason that she goes back to him is she realizes that, there's more to him. Because when push came to shove, he stood up, he took the leadership, he did what was necessary. His knowledge of the situations and what was happening was more useful than prick Dave's over here. And if, he was willing to listen to people, and he was willing to be okay, here's what I think needs to happen. And when Beanie Girl, because again, these two did not get named very well. That is my one critique. Is
Diane
what?
was her name.
Thank you, Diane. I'm sorry.
Love Diane, though.
I do love Diane. She just didn't catch her name because,
And she was also the actress who would go on to play Etta Candy in the Wonder Woman movie. Wonder Woman keeps on haunting this month for some reason.
That's right.
Weird. And I mean, Gal Gadot is dead to me, so I guess that kind of works for the theme, doesn't it?
Shaun, he goes to check for zombies and see if the coast is clear on that slide, which, by the way, phenomenal bit of humor there. Just
Among many other phenomenal bits of humor, but yes.
Yes, as serious as this discussion has been so far, I promise to those of you who have somehow not watched this movie, this is a hilarious movie. It
does have comedy, I promise. Despite my Letterboxd review, it is a comedy.
It definitely benefits from the fact that it is so funny. That I think that is what kind of emphasizes the horror and the very, very dramatic moments. It just helps underscore those moments because I think because the movie is so funny from start to finish, when it gets really serious, this is a testament to the cast as well. Simon Pegg, very underrated as a dramatic actor, I think. Those moments when they have to play it straight, when they have to really emphasize the pain that the characters are feeling, you really feel for them. They do an incredible job of hitting you hard with those emotions.
Even when those same moments have moments of humor thrown in, they don't diffuse the tension really as much as they kind of add to it almost.
She's not your mum anymore. In a minute she'll be just another zombie. Don't say that! We're not using the Z word!
Please, can we just calm the fuck down?
There's a great term that I've heard before, which is used to accuse a lot of later Marvel movies and stuff. It's called bathos, which is for anyone who is unfamiliar with the term, it's essentially undercutting a dramatic scene with a joke. So, and in doing so, undermining the drama in the scene, like basically deflating whatever drama was there. Almost as if
Yeah.
the filmmakers are afraid that if they get too serious, they're going to lose the audience. And this movie has none of that. Like, I think, Edgar Wright is so, like, he has so much faith in the script and in his cast and in his crew in terms of shooting the film, that he is not afraid. You can see this in like all of the Cornetto trilogy movies. You can see this in pretty much all of his film work. Like, he's not scared of having a moment in a comedy that gets very serious and requires you, the audience, to sit there and to deal with whatever sadness or anger the characters are feeling and really believe it too. I think so. What do you think, Katie?
Because of the tone of this film, it is a very funny movie. There's some, like I said, there's great, understated humor. There's great little quips. There's, instances of kind of slight slapstick.
Those are the aspects that basically everyone on the internet has talked about, which is why we felt more comfortable delving into more of the themes of the story.
And it makes me wonder if that's why David, as a character, why we find him so unpleasant, because of all the characters in the film, he doesn't make any jokes. And he's the one who's asking all the questions about, like, well, what about this? What about this? I can kind of sympathize with him to a certain degree, because when I'm in a crisis situation, if I have like clear steps, like I'm walking down the street, somebody slips and falls and like hits their head. Okay, clear steps. See if the person is responsive. If they are not, make sure that they are like in a safe place. Call 911, give the address, explain the situation, on and on and on, like clear steps of what to do. And I think that, if this was a movie where London was besieged by an epidemic of people falling over and, and hurting their legs, David would have been a lot more of an effective character. But because he is the person who is not finding any of this funny, because he is the person who is asking questions, because deep down, like, it's mentioned that he's a lecturer. So this is somebody who is used to, being in charge, being in controlled situations where he knows the steps of what to do. And the reason that we watch him crumble is because he does not know what to do. And because of that, he isn't like Shaun in the sense that he's incapable of making decisions because he's fundamentally insecure. He's in a position where he can't make decisions because he does not have the data that he needs to make logical decisions, because in this universe, there are no good decisions to make. And because of that, he comes across as this insufferable prick. But I can sympathize with him a lot, because based on my own experiences, when I was helping out with immigration paperwork, that's a clear-cut definition. Fill out the paperwork, follow the directions, mail it here, make sure it gets here by this time, and then we will address those steps, whatever they are. In an amorphous situation of, the plague has descended and nobody knows what to do, I am David. I am the one going, well, like, if we do this, what about this? What about this eventuality? And so I find it interesting that people are very quick to write off that character as like, oh my God, he's such an asshole. When really, I think all of us know somebody in our lives, or could be that person in our own lives, who crumbles under that sort of pressure. And it's funny that more people don't sympathize with him.
Mm-hmm.
I will say a major aspect of it is just how much he clearly hates Shaun, and how we do wind up finding out a major aspect of that is because he wants Liz, and he's basically stringing poor Diane along. Like, I feel like without that, maybe more people would sympathize with him, just on the virtue of he is the most nerd-coded.
Yeah.
Well, a good point that's brought up here is that, like, even like David is the most insufferable of the characters, it's true, but you can in a way sympathize with the fact that, like the rest of them, he has no idea what's going on. He's just the one who's most vocal about it. And what I like about the film is that no one is out and out just a bad, terrible person. Like when we meet Pete is always giving out about Ed. He's always grumpy about the situation. But, even when you're young, you kind of understand why, because he is trying to get along, like Ed and Shaun, in his late 20s. But unlike them, has a sense of responsibility and a feeling of wanting to move forward. And so you kind of understand when he's really annoyed that Ed has been basically living there seemingly rent-free. Whenever they go out and come back drunk, they apparently always leave the front door unlocked, so anybody could wander in. And so you kind of get a sense that, like, even you don't have to like them, because you might find their attitudes to be, a little off-putting, but you can kind of, on repeated watches of the movie, like, you start to gain a better, like, sense of empathy for everyone, including everyone from Shaun's stepdad with whom he had a very rocky relationship, to the housemate that is frustrated with the fact that, he's living with 2 man children. It's and that's a real testament, I think, to the quality of the screenwriting and the quality of the characters.
Yeah, I always sympathize with Pete because I
And
was
then
always a
it's-
responsible friend too, and fortunately I never lived with anybody who did anything like that to me. But it can be very frustrating to have friends who are still still kind of figuring out what they want to do with their lives. So they're like, hey, we're gonna go out drinking. You want to come with us? Like, it is 8 p.m. on a Wednesday. So what you're saying is, do you want to lose your job or do you want to have no friends? Fuck you.
On a totally unrelated note, I am the exact same age as Shaun at this time of recording.
Diane decides that they're going to fake being zombies, and Dave is like, essentially, this is the dumbest fucking idea I've ever heard of. What the fuck are we doing? And everyone else goes along with it.
It is worth noting Diane is as said in the film, a failed actress. So this is another example of somebody who is maybe kind of down on their luck or just hasn't been able to reach their full potential, being able to use this situation to use their skills and actually, because it does work for quite some time before Ed once again ruins everything.
It was Ed and then Dave made things worse.
And then Dave kind of refused to listen. Like, at least, Shaun was like, okay, let me hear out kind of what your plans are. We'll go from there. I have plans, but y'all might got something better. I ain't got fuck shit. And then, Dave is like, absolutely not. We're not getting it. I'm breaking the window. And then 10 minutes later, Shaun's like, well, if you had listened, I would have told you there was a back way in. And he's still willing to listen, but he also can come up with plans.
It's funny / sad that Shaun, for the first time in his life, takes initiative and has a plan and follows through with it. And when things change, adapts his plan and comes up with a new approach, comes up with new ideas, is ready to take the lead. When they get to the Winchester and they're unable to get inside and the zombies are approaching, he's the one who steps up and is like, I will lead them away. It's a great example of him kind of his development as a character, of finally showing up and taking some initiative with his life. But it's also very sad because literally none of his ideas work. All of his plans fail.
But isn't that being in your late 20s?
But that is true. That's being in your late 20s. So, that's...
As someone who is currently in his late 20s right now, oh yes.
That's life. That's just life.
That's what all the people say.
Men plan, God laughs, and all that. But yeah, it still matters that Shaun is doing his goddamn best. And at the end of the day, isn't that all we can do?
Absolutely. It's actually kind of interesting. I don't know how many of you have seen the Innuendo Studios video essay about the Cornetto trilogy as a whole, but one point that he brought up that I always found kind of interesting is that one of the recurring themes, if you can say that, is that even though at face value these movies all look like they're trying to say something about the importance of growing up, they're also kind of saying something about how you can find ways to make the world around you change so that you don't have to completely give up your sense of self, for better or for worse. And of course, The World's End shows the ludicrous end goal of that in that particular scenario, but sticking to just this movie, technically that is kind of what happens. Yeah, Shaun does technically step up more as a character, but at the same time, he doesn't really have to make any particularly massive sacrifices to his sense of relationship dynamic with the people in his life. His feelings about them don't really change all that much. The world around him changed to suit it a lot more. That said, boy did he sure experience some trauma along the way, so I don't blame him for wanting to just try and keep things steady. I mean, my God, I don't know how I would handle some of the decisions that Shaun was forced to make, especially towards the end of this movie. Should we get to that?
Yes, let's get to his stepdad and his mom. Oof.
Yeah, because what I liked about the stepdad is, again, they kind of set up, he was a cruel parental figure. No, he was an angsty 12-year-old who didn't like the fact that his mom seemingly moved on, and he just never really got over that.
Never really got over losing his father, never really got over the fact he had a stepdad, the constantly correcting people when they say he's his dad, even though he has been in their lives for 17 years at this point. He has been in his life longer than his actual father had.
Right? Now, granted, Shaun's not wrong for saying, well, he did do one thing that was really mean, and it's kind of hard to forgive him for that, but it's always that one same thing out of 17 years. So if that's all he has, then surely it wasn't actually that bad overall. Surely.
Yeah, and just one thing I really find interesting about what few death by zombie bites we have seen, it seems like the final moments for these characters, it's always saying just the best goodbye they could come up with.
The moment of clarity.
Yeah, and it's just like, I always loved you, Shaun, and it makes you really feel like, God, imagine if Shaun had gotten his head out of his ass and literally like 15 minutes prior in the movie, he was trying to tell his mother that he had touched him inappropriately, and now he's sobbing over his corpse because he realizes what the relationship he lost out on.
Right? And great subversion, too, because at this point, actor Bill Nighy, I believe, was already being typecast for either just playing villains or at least characters you're supposed to be distrustful of. And yet, even when he's just being a grumpy old man stereotype, basically, there's such a likability to it. And I do love the fact that they do make it as a joke when he does get zombified. That's not the man you once knew, but he still reaches out to turn down the volume on the radio because he thinks the music is too loud. So, even freshly zombified Bill Nighy's stepdad is still annoyed by music being loud.
Yeah, there's still a little bit in there.
Yeah.
And it actually does kind of remind me, this is a brief tangent, but there's a comic series called Night of the Living Deadpool, where it's just basically Deadpool and the zombie apocalypse. And what's interesting is the twist there is all the zombies are speaking, and by what they're saying, you could tell they don't want to be doing what they're doing, but they can't stop themselves. So it does kind of remind me of that. There is still some little bit of that person there, and that just makes it all the sadder.
It's an interesting little tribute, I think, as well to, again, the Romero zombie movies, which you can tell are like a big influence on this because, first of all, the zombies themselves, they act and move like Romero zombies. They are slow and staggering, and they kind of gather in large groups and kind of move as one. And you have all the little, like, when Ed is saying, "We're coming to get you, Barbara," like, that's the most blatant reference to Night of the Living Dead. But if you're familiar with the later films, Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead, we see that the zombies themselves become, in Dawn of the Dead, the zombies are like congregating around like the shopping mall, and one of the characters asks, like, why are they coming here? And one of the other characters says, this is just a place that meant something to them. And as Romero went back to that kind of like universe later on in Day of the Dead, where they start trying to teach the zombies basic skills, and one of the main protagonists of Day of the Dead is a zombie who is abused by like the soldiers in this army base, and who basically takes revenge upon them. And you see it again even later in Land of the Dead, which was made many years later, where you see like the zombies have basically kind of acting out things that they remember doing in their lives, like the gas station attendant who remembers pumping gas. So I thought that the way that Bill Nighy's character turns off the music, that was a great joke, but also like a great homage to Romero-esque zombies. And the way the film ends as well, with like, 6 months,
Exactly.
6 months have passed.
I was about to say, like, that pays off into a commentary point about retail work.
Which, as someone who spent a lot of time working retail, that's an oof.
6.5 years being a ticket taker at a movie theater, you have to just say the same words over and over again for several hours. I was basically paid to stand up and repeat 2 sentences, maybe 3. But I got free movies out of it on my off time, so it wasn't all bad. And my coworkers are really cool, so, it wasn't hell on earth or anything, but I definitely knew I had to get out of there or I was going to, feel like Shaun at the beginning of this movie, just stuck in a dead-end, low-pay job that doesn't make me feel like my life's ever going to go anywhere, so I decided to take a gamble and see if I could get steady enough work as a singer, which, I wouldn't say it's paid off yet, but it's definitely feeling more and more like it is with every passing year, and I hope I didn't just jinx it by saying that out loud.
Knocking on wood for you, buddy.
Thank you.
Of course, yeah. Listen, we're all trying. And Yeah, let's get to Shaun's mom.
Mm.
Because that...
Ooh, I
Let me
didn't
say
want
this
him
part.
to worry.
It's interesting because, like, it's basically a trope in zombie movies that there's the one character who hides the zombie bite, and it's pretty much a universally reviled character. Barbara is one of the few cases where it's not just because we love her so much.
Right?
She just
She's
wants
so
everything to be-
lovely.
she just wants everything to be pleasant. She's kind of in denial about everything. And honestly, watching this after knowing what's going to happen to her, it's so obvious she's turning into a zombie, and it
Oh,
just
yeah.
makes it hurt even more. Callie, since
Right, Diana's acting coaching, and like,
Look at the face. It's vacant, with a hint of sadness. Like a drunk who's lost a bet. Okay, let's try, shall we? Liz. Nice, good vocal work. Okay. Barbara, that's excellent.
Sorry, dear, I was miles away.
and Barbara's just already got that look by default on her face.
As the one person who did watch this the first time, did you see that coming?
I wasn't surprised because it's kind of that rock bottom, you gotta lose everything moment.
That does make sense, yeah.
It's funny you bring up the trope, it is a cliche of like, the one person in a group who's been bitten and is turning into a zombie but doesn't tell everyone else. And you're right that, like, for the most part, like, that character is usually a character that we do not like. And their reasons for not telling the others that they've been bitten are because they naturally are afraid that they will be killed. But by virtue of never telling anyone, they threaten the lives of the survivors even more. And the same is kind of true here with Barbara, because she doesn't tell anybody, and by the time she dies and starts to turn, the situation has gotten really bad already. And her now dying and turning into a zombie, it makes the situation even worse, because now the focus has gone from defending themselves from the swarm around them to what do we do with the one person that 5 minutes ago we were talking to and is now a zombie. Like, now it becomes that, and it tears the group apart even faster. But I think the reason why it feels so sad and even sadder is because, as you said, Jasmine, like, she didn't want to cause any trouble. Like, she doesn't do it out of being afraid that they're going to kill her. She does it because she understands that, like, her son and her son's friends, like, everybody is dealing with a lot of stress right now, and she doesn't want to add to that. And it's so heartbreaking.
Putting myself in Barbara's position is, she sees her son trying his best under, let's face it, like, nobody can prepare for this. There's nobody on earth that can train for this sort of thing. The friends never make her feel like, oh God, we have to bring, this woman along. She's going to slow us down. Like, everybody is very kind and very caring. Everybody is concerned about her welfare, even David. Although, like, towards the end, yes. But again, he is making the pragmatic decision, and it makes him seem like a villain. But he is ultimately right. At no point in the movie does he say, Shaun, we have to leave your mom behind. She's going to slow us down. Shaun, like, your mom is not taking the situation seriously. We have to just leave her behind. She has to fend for herself. Or even like, look, there's a building. It looks abandoned. We'll put her in there. We'll lock the doors. She'll be safe in there. At no point does anybody do that. And so, yeah, that just makes it that much harder because she's become a core member of that group now. Again, Simon Pegg, his acting there is stellar.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, that man is weeping like a child, and it is heartbreaking.
Yeah, like, Simon Pegg, he really does need more credit as someone who can do dramatic performances as well as comedy, and the Cornetto trilogy alone is such a great demonstration of it. We get similarly gut-wrenching moments in, say, The World's End, even though he's playing a character who comparatively is so much less likable than Shaun. Yeah. You still get some heartbreaking moments acting-wise from him in that movie. So yeah, he's good. He's genuinely a good actor. Did Nick Frost's character, did Ed just really enjoy listening to, like, Flava Flav all the time? Because he seems to quote him quite a bit.
Yeah.
That's a classic thing, though. That's the classic, like coming to you from, like, the quote-unquote British Isles. Like, yeah, that's a classic sort of Irish / like British Irish white boy thing where, like, we all go through our hip-hop phase. And
oh God,
this is a side of you I've never heard of.
Oh yeah,
you
I went through a hip-hop phase. Yeah. I went through a lot of phases before I started punk rock. Let's put it that way.
It must be an island thing, because I'm here to tell you that the Japanese guys that I knew also went through a hip-hop phase.
Yeah.
As long as you don't use the N-word, we're good.
Yeah, but man, like, actually hearing the N-word coming out of Nick Frost, even if it was that one time, I was just like, oh no.
Oh, that happened.
God damn it, Ed. Why are you the worst?
Even during my worst, most problematic phase as a young adult, I never felt compelled to do that.
Ed definitely encapsulates a lot of, like, worst characteristics of that kind of guy. It never feels like he's very much like the definition of a man-child in so many ways, in that he, you know, like, he struggles so often to recognize, like, the needs of others, and so he'll often, sometimes without even thinking it, like, say the most ridiculous things, and say things that, like you can look at him now and you even then, his behavior, even for 2004, was at times pretty darn unacceptable, and the only reason he kind of gets away with it, I think, is because Nick Frost is so lovable. And ultimately, I think, you know, he, for all of Ed's failings, for all of Ed's constant failings, he's always there for Shaun. You know, he kind of relies on Shaun to kind of cover his ass, but when Shaun tells him that, you know, we have to go do something, Ed never really says no. Like, when Shaun says we have to go find Liz, and Ed's like, why? And Shaun goes, I love her. And then Ed, you know, in classic 2004
okay, gay.
Okay, gay.
Right, because
lads,
nothing gayer than a dude loving a woman, right?
Lads, is it gay to be in love with your girlfriend? But
Editor Jasmine back again. It's worth noting that in the same COVID-19 PSA that Nick Frost and Simon Pegg did, they actually commented on this part.
Well, she's my girlfriend.
All right, Grey.
What do you mean, all right? Yeah, I see what you're doing. I know it's 2020, but the original joke wasn't intended as homophobic. It was more a comment on the absurdity of straight male appropriation of homophobic signifiers in order to denote their aversion to emotional candidness.
He does refer to cigarettes a few times with the term that's now considered a slur, so...
That's really weird, though, 'cause, like,
I mean... That's very British.
That's very British, though. Like, for, like...
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
Like, in the same way that there is a four-letter word beginning with the letter T used all in this movie, that... As I was growing up, I never thought anything bad about it, and it wasn't until I came to America or got, like, introduced to how, like, Americans use that use that four-letter word beginning with T, that I realized, okay, here it's, like, considered a really bad word.
Also, the four-letter word beginning with C,
yeah,
that he uses to address his friends. Like, I remember seeing that in the movie theater. Lots of uncomfortable laughter and a few audible gasps. Was like, what did he just say? Yeah. Like, how is this guy not on the floor getting, like, kicked in the head? You know, like...
If this was Australia, it wouldn't be clinch.
And now it's getting reclaimed by just about everybody on the internet. Go figure.
Right? Because I was about to say, because even back in 2004, if this was being shown in Australia, I'll bet you anything the audience would barely even flinch.
Yeah, in spite of the fact that, yeah, if anything, I almost think I might hate Ed a little bit more in this viewing. Just because, yeah, every decision he makes just makes everybody's lives harder.
And at the end, he gets to basically stay a child forever in the sense of him being brain dead, but still having the know-how to keep playing video games in zombie form.
Well, sure, but, like, even then, I did still really feel heartbroken when Shaun had to watch him get bitten and to slowly die. It's just...
yeah.
Again, and here we have another really great callback. Earlier in the movie, you had Pete yelling at Ed, and Shaun was all,
"Oh, leave him alone! Stop defending him, Shaun! All he ever does is hold you back!"
And when coincidentally, Pete is one of the zombies that's eating Ed.
Pete! I said leave him alone!
And on the one hand, it's funny, but on the other hand, I weep. Damn, yep, I feel that, Shaun. Yeah. I feel that in my bones, and therefore I do feel awful that you are losing your best friend.
And even though the fact Ed is still able to have a sense of humor even through all of that, it's just like, that's kind of charming in its own way, I will admit. It's like, never mind, I would like to be shot.
And yeah, again, Nick Frost plays it to the hilt. Plays it beautifully.
Wild to consider that, like, he didn't really do any acting. He literally just was Simon Pegg's best friend. And so when they were casting for Space, Simon was like, Nick, do you want to play my best friend in this TV show that we're doing? And that's kind of how Nick Frost's acting career began, because he was best mates with Simon Pegg. It's very Shaun and Ed.
He's still proved in the years since that he's got range. Like, I don't know if any of you have seen The World's End, but in that one the roles are kind of reversed, because in that one Simon Pegg is playing the man-child and Nick Frost is playing the more serious, trying to keep things together kind of guy.
I know of the Cornetto trilogy, The World's End is probably a lot of people's third favorite, but for me, like, when I saw it, man, like, I was at a point in my life when I saw that movie where it hit me like a Mack truck. Man, this is the movie that, like, a group of best mates makes after they've been making movies together and living their lives for like 20 years. And they have to look back on, like, what have we done? And are we satisfied with what we did? The whole Cornetto trilogy is like a tour de force. And it started off on, like, it hit the ground running with Shaun of the Dead. I think that's all I can say about it, you know?
Katie needs to get a chance to talk about the album throwing.
I will make this very brief, but I was curious about who did the music supervision on this film. You know, who's the one who chose all the various pop songs that appeared in there? Because
Nick Angel is the name of the guy.
Yeah, and I looked it up. He's done quite a lot, and he has done a fantastic job, because I have not seen a ton of Edgar Wright films, but the ones that I have seen, every single musical choice is on point. And as somebody who at one point was thinking of possibly trying to get into the music supervision scene, I have so much respect for what he did there.
Absolutely. Fun fact about Nick Angel, clearly his work was very well appreciated, because his name would then be given to Simon Pegg's character in the second film in the Cornetto trilogy, Hot Fuzz. His name is Nicholas Angel. So clearly Wright had a lot of appreciation for his excellent ear for what made for good needle drops. And secondly, I was one of those kids who was checking out Flash animations on Newgrounds back in the early 2000s, and let me tell you, if something was zombie themed, chances are it borrowed some of the needle drops from Shaun of the Dead, because they were just so damn good.
I mean, yeah, like, again, the Don't Stop Me Now needle drop is one of the greatest in cinematic history, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, but, like, even the more obscure ones, like Ghost Town, that starts the movie as a needle drop, I've heard that used as opening credits music for a zombie-themed Flash animation from, I think, 05, 06, somewhere around that time. I think it was 06. Yeah, it's
Katie,
great.
how did you feel about the albums that were chosen to be thrown and the arguing over which ones?
I think we've had similar conversations in this household. Let me tell you, when two audiophiles, when two big music fans move in together, one of them has to kind of like condense their life down to a few suitcases and can only bring the essential discs. It is both gratifying and heartbreaking to have to sit there and go, okay, you have the UK, so the UK pressing has, you have like two different bonus albums, but mine came with like the free DVD that has like the making of, so which one are we getting rid of here? And yeah, so I know what it is like to have to part with music under dire circumstances.
Did you agree with the decisions that they made about the throwing, with the Prince versus Batman?
I think I actually made an angry noise when I found out that one of the things that they threw was Blue Monday, and so did you, sweetheart. Yeah, because it was like, didn't they say it was like an original pressing or something?
Yeah, when Shaun goes, that was original pressing of Blue Monday. Like, I felt that pain.
Yeah, we were both just like, oh my god.
Same with me for Diamond Life by Sade. How dare you? That is a wonderful album.
I had to give Katie that one, because everybody shut up. Katie's gonna talk about music.
Hey, I get it. I do music professionally, and I'm also a colossal music nerd, so I understand.
Yeah. So I guess with that all in mind, why does Night of the Living Dead endure? We didn't really get too much into it, but yeah, this is yet another story of people who get thrust into a zombie apocalypse and have to do their best to make it. And hey, you know what? This one did have a lower body count. But anyway, so why does Night of the Living Dead endure? And why does Shaun of the Dead endure?
2020. Just go look at 2020. Problem solved. That's your answer.
Oof. I mean, it did take like a quarter of this recording, so yes.
I don't mean to sound glib, just like...
No, I'm agreeing with you.
I think Callie makes a really good point though. Like, just look at 2020, because I think zombies and vampires kind of have something similar in that they've been depicted in many different forms over decades now at this point. And like vampires, zombies can kind of represent whatever sort of social anxiety or social ill you're feeling. So I'm not as up to date on zombie media as I used to be, but it wouldn't surprise me to know that there are like a clutch of low budget zombie movies that are based around like, a viral epidemic that turns people eventually into zombies.
28 Days Later.
They're doing a sequel to that now, which is going to be coming out in the next year or two. And I have to imagine that that's going to be influenced greatly by the last few years. So to answer your question of why does it endure, I think that's why. I think because with every generation that gets their hands on the zombie, they can use it as an examination, much like Romero did. Every time he made one of these movies, they can use it as a way to examine something that they see in society that infects as a people, as a society. And I think in Edgar Wright's case, Shaun of the Dead is kind of about like the zombifying, the sort of like stultifying inability to maybe embrace your maturity in a way that still allows you to enjoy fun. The fear that if you embrace maturity, you have to put away all childish things. And that's something that I think we see again and again. Like, especially like in the last 20 years with the growth of geek media and superhero movies and such, like you get a sense that like there's like a societal fear maybe among a certain segment of society of letting go a little bit and allowing yourself to kind of, I don't want to say grow up, but embrace the different layers of yourself.
I think for me, the reason that the zombie movie endures, no matter who makes it or how quickly or slowly the zombies run, is because if you enjoy history, you know that there have been points where humanity has come very close to total societal collapse, at least in certain regions, if not, globally. And so I think that deep down, zombie movies, no matter what they are addressing, be it civil rights, be it, nostalgia, be it, whatever quote unquote threat is posed against society, it always speaks to that lingering fear of what if it all fell apart tomorrow and where would we go from there?
And I think that speaks to some of the rules that are like in Zombieland, where it's like number 17 is don't be a hero, or like number 8 is get a kick-ass partner, like 32 enjoy the little things, trust no one, just you and me. Like all of those things kind of speak to that idea of community and like societal collapse, and who do you rely on when shit's gone to fuck? Like at what point when things have gone bad and wrong, what happens? What do you do?
It took a global pandemic taking place for me to get over the point I made at the beginning about how I couldn't quite get into zombie movies, less due to squeamishness and due to my rejection of nihilism wholesale, making it difficult for me to suspend disbelief over it. Now I find it a lot easier to buy into. I wouldn't say that I have become nihilistic since, thankfully, but I definitely understand more why people think that way, because, oh my goodness, the idea of the zombie apocalypse, I now completely understand why it appeals so much to why we are afraid of the world we take for granted just falling apart through circumstances totally beyond our control, and how it can symbolically reflect whatever social ill it is that's going on, which makes me wonder what it's going to be like in the future when it gets used for more contemporary allegories that haven't been tapped yet.
I think that's kind of like, people joked during the pandemic, like about Fallout, like, well, Fallout's completely unbelievable now. Nobody's staying in a shelter for 100 years. We can't even get people to stay in their house for 2 weeks.
But yeah, honestly, there isn't much I can really add to why zombie apocalypse stories endure, but why this movie in particular endures is that I find that as someone who, as I've said a few times before in this recording, is now Shaun's age as of this recording, I understand the feeling of being in that place in life where Shaun is and feeling like, man, if something like that happened, maybe I'd be able to get my life more in order. And then that got put to the test, and no, didn't really happen. I had to, on my own terms, independently of that, learn how to be a more in-control person of my life. And I think this story endures because it's a fun exploration of how there is a humorous side to this very premise, but it still doesn't sugarcoat the fact that if this did happen to anybody, it would still be difficult. And I love how wonderfully it walks that line. It's such a masterclass in filmmaking.
I even wrote in like my Letterboxd review that I don't necessarily want another apocalypse to get me to hero status. It didn't work the first time.
Yeah.
But it was refreshing to see a hapless regular dude save the day.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, I think that's part of the appeal of something like Night of the Living Dead or Shaun of the Dead or really any zombie movie. We are seeing these ordinary people thrown into a horrifying situation, and sure, not all of them are going to be able to overcome it, and those that do are probably traumatized for life, but there is still something about the endurance of the human spirit in spite of the worst circumstances. To quote Wes Craven, horror doesn't create fear, it releases it. And I think it's easy for us to be afraid of what will happen if society falls apart. It's easy for us to believe that we're all just going to turn on each other like rabid animals. But I think a part of us also wants to believe that we will be able to endure and we will be able to take care of each other in spite of the worst circumstances. And I think that is partially at the heart of the genre. In spite of what I once thought about it just being about the shambling masses and violence, there can be a lot of heart in this genre. All right, final thoughts?
If you haven't watched it, I mean, it's been around for like 20 years. Now's as good a time as any.
Don't be like me. Don't live under a rock.
If you don't much care for the idea of a zombie movie, maybe give this one a try anyway, because it will show you that it at least can still give you a few laughs and give you an idea as to why people might like the genre, even if it doesn't convert you. Also, watch the other two films in the Cornetto trilogy, because they are also really fun in their own way, as different genre deconstruction / loving homages.
Yeah, for the record, in spite of how deep that this whole review got, I promise you this is a comedy.
Oh yeah, they just have a lot of effective dramatic scenes in them, but they are ultimately comedies.
Actually, real quick, everybody just bring up their favorite funny bit so we can end this on a high note.
Oh, gosh. There's so many good ones. You were parked!
You know what? Fair. I gotta go with the whole sequence where they're trying to make an escape plan. Perfect. Or, honestly, when they're so drunk that they're singing along with that one zombie's groans. Like, I can only imagine what it must have been like to first see that scene when this first came out. It's just like, dudes, what is wrong with you?
Fun fact, I think that zombie was actually played by Chris Martin of Coldplay.
Is it real? Oh, that's fun. That is so fun.
And then Coldplay are revealed to be part of a zombie charity later.
Yep, that is true. That was fun. That was a fun one. Zombie aid.
I think for me, it's because I've had moments like this. I mean, not literally, but figuratively, where Shaun is not paying attention and accidentally hits a person who he's not sure if he's a zombie or not, and his response is to roll down the window and just kind of go, "You all right?" And then when the zombie starts moving, he goes, "Oh, thank God for that."
The slide is also pretty good.
Yes.
I was gonna say, I think for me, like, yeah, one of the, like, for me, some of the funniest bits are just the way, yeah, the framing of Shaun, like, climbing up the ladder for the slide, and then climbing back down, and then just looking at the rest of the group, and just in that like incredible tone of voice where he just says, "Yeah, there are a lot out there. Yeah, it's bad." Like,
and it slowly pans up, and it's like, "Ooh, that is a lot of zombies."
Yeah.
All right.
For me, the channel change gag. The fact that each channel change conveniently makes each sentence completion work cogently thematically.
Although no one official is prepared to comment, religious groups are calling it Judgment Day. There's panic on the streets of London.
As an increasing number of reports of
Serious attacks on
people who are literally being
eaten alive.
A witness reports are sketchy. One unifying detail seems to be that the attackers in many instances appear to be
Dead excited to have with us here a sensational chart-topping...
You know, that got me so hard when I first noticed that gag, especially the incorporation of the Sir David Attenborough wildlife documentary bit. That was perfect. That was the cream on top to me.
You're so right. All right, that was fun. So who has stuff to plug?
My name is Callie Castle, and you can find me on all of the social medias at my link tree in the bio that Jazz will post for you guys. If you guys could, with your wallet, we'll post some links in the bio as well. If you guys could please donate to Hurricane Helene or Milton reliefs. I don't personally live in the area. I wasn't personally affected. None of us were, thankfully. But I do know people who were. I know people who live in that area. There are water plants that will have to be reconstructed because they were so severely damaged. And so they're having to bust water in. On a happier note, today was the release of Dalton the Shade of the Traveling Show's Bodies for the Geek Pit EP Part 1. You can find that wherever music is released. And if you like music, if you just like music, you should go listen to it right now. As soon as you finish this episode, right now, go listen. Just go listen right now.
Awesome. If you haven't been listening too frequently to this podcast, well, first off, what are you doing? But second off, you might have noticed that I've been a guest on this podcast before a few times. And that's partially because I'm practicing my own podcasting of my own. I also host a podcast called The Disney Outlands. It's a podcast where we discuss feature films, short films, episodes, and specials that have been produced by the Disney company, but are not found on their major streaming platforms. We've recorded our first 2 episodes already, and the first one should be released very, very soon, and I am extremely excited about it, so be sure to join me on that adventure through the lost and forgotten, the unloved and appreciated.
You can find me on Blue Sky. You used to be able to find me elsewhere, but I don't go there anymore. So you can find me on Blue Sky. My username is Young Mr. Duffy. I repost art that I like. I make the occasional joke. I ramble about different movies and stuff, and Katie and I have an itch.io page if you'd like to share a little bit about info about that, love.
You caught me because I was going to say I do nothing of interest or import, which is how you can that's what it says on my Blue Sky bio.
Lies.
I work in marketing. We have a radio show, Third Country Radio, on BFF.FM. It's a community radio station out of San Francisco, but you can listen to it anytime. We have quite an archive now. We also have Third Country Press, which is over on Itch. You can play some of the games. Again, from my Blue Sky bio, I come up with ideas, but not mechanics. That is Connor's job, to take my ridiculous ideas for, silly games and turns them into something actually workable.
If you want to play our most popular game, Grandma Club, you can download it for free or pay what you want if you want to give us $1 from there. If you want to play feisty old women dealing with day-to-day problems in small village Britain.
Yes.
Give them some money.
And as always, you can find me on Twitter, Tumblr, TikTok, and Blue Sky at Faye Riviera. You could also follow the show on Twitter at IER Podcast. And if you would like to help us reach the next chapter of our story, please consider leaving us a review or rating us on the podcatcher of your choice, telling all of your friends and family about us. And even better, if you have room in your wallets, please consider donating to our Patreon, our Ko-Fi page, or just the support the show link below.
Above all, we're all in this together. Don't be selfish. Look after each other. Give someone a call if you think they might be lonely. Okay?
Couldn't have said it better myself, Simon Pegg. And now, to announce our penultimate episode of Monster Month 2, The Dead Are Rising, we have our very special wall-dwelling guest, Sam Marchione, who is going to be using one of their wishes. For those of you who might have forgotten or haven't been here before, I have given every member of our little podcast family 3 wishes, where they get to basically force my hand in making me review something on this show. Hopefully it won't be as terrifying as Callie's wish was. So, Sam, what is your wish?
I'm so glad you asked, Jazz, because I was actually at this old library and I found this really cool thing in the back between these bloody manuscripts. I think you're really going to love it. Check it out!
Bloody manuscripts? That doesn't give you cursed vibes at all?
No, it's fine, because I looked and there was blood, but then I looked away and I looked back and the blood was gone, so I'm sure it's fine.
Okay, Don Juan Triumphant. Wait, is that, it from the Phantom of the Opera? Does that have anything to do with monsters or the dead rising, though?
Please, it is my birthday, or it was.
That is true, it is your birthday. I mean, Okay. Again, the bloody manuscripts do give me pause, but I'm sure it's fine.
Yeah, and it's so beautiful, it's so gentle, it's like a lullaby.
Uh-huh. Sam, did you hear that? I could have sworn I heard somebody singing. Fuck!
Battle with Phantom Freddy Krueger later.
Okay. Hi, dear listeners. So, apparently Sam's initial wish managed to awaken this weird dream demon version of the Phantom of the Opera. But don't worry, Sam and I managed to home alone his ass, and then we destroyed the manuscript, so he may never rise again. And now they're gonna pick something else, right, Sam?
I want to talk about that Phantom.
Sure, I'm sure nothing bad will come of that, right? Right? Well, dear listeners, we do hope you join us for talking about the Phantom Freddy hybrid that we just beat up. And remember, stories gain power in each retelling, whether we like it or not.
Player 2 has entered the game.
Ed! Yes!
Good shot. Okay, he's dead. Let's go get him. That's another one for the fire.
All right, send the wagon through directly out. Over.